I used to think my life was pretty normal, just like everyone else. My name is Jake, and I'm a 35-year-old guy living in Portland. I've been married to Sarah for 8 years, and up until recently I thought we were happy. Sure, we had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing that felt out of the ordinary. At least that's what I thought. But then came the day that unraveled everything. Sarah had started acting differently a few months ago. Little things at first. She'd come home late from work more often, claiming she was stuck in meetings. She was always on her phone, and when I'd ask who she was texting, she'd brush it off, saying it was just work stuff. I figured she was just stressed, maybe even bored with our routine. I tried to spice things up, planned date nights and surprised her with little gifts, but nothing seemed to work. She'd roll her eyes at me and call me boring and predictable. It stung, but I just wanted to make her happy. I brushed it off, thinking we'd get through it. But then came that fateful Saturday. I had planned a surprise weekend trip to the coast, thinking it would be a great way to reconnect. As I packed our bags, I noticed Sarah's phone vibrating on the kitchen counter. One of those gut feelings kicked in. I shouldn't have snooped, but I picked it up. There was a message from someone named Mike, and a notification about a weekend getaway, complete with a location I didn't recognize. My heart raced as I opened the message. "Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you so much, babe. Let's make it special," it read. My mind was racing. I didn't want to believe what I was reading, but it all clicked into place. The late nights, the secrecy, and now this. I felt like I was suffocating. I put the phone down and just stood there, staring at it in disbelief. The world around me blurred, and it was as if I were trapped in some kind of nightmare. I confronted her that evening when she got home. I was calm on the outside, but inside I was a storm ready to explode. When she walked in with that same fake smile plastered on her face, I couldn't hold back any longer. "Who's Mike?" I asked, my voice steady but full of rage. She froze, her eyes going wide, and for a moment it felt like the air in the room got sucked out. "What are you talking about?" she replied, feigning ignorance, but I could see the panic bubbling beneath her facade. I pressed her and the truth started spilling out. She claimed it was all innocent, just a friend from work who was going through a rough patch. But I could see right through her lies. The longer we talked, the more her excuses crumbled. She was trying to make me look like the bad guy for even questioning her loyalty. I was furious, hurt, and completely blindsided. How could she do this to me? How could she throw away everything we had built together for some cheap thrill? I felt like I couldn't breathe. Every word she said cut deeper than any knife. I realized then that the woman I once loved was gone, replaced by someone who didn't care about the life we built together. As she continued to justify her actions, my mind started racing through a whirlwind of emotions: anger, disbelief, and a deep, gut-wrenching sadness. I felt like I was in a movie, watching my life fall apart in slow motion. Each excuse she threw at me felt like another punch to the gut. I knew I had to make a choice. Did I want to salvage our marriage, or was this the end of us? I spent the night wrestling with my thoughts, going through all the memories we had shared over the years. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to cry, but instead I sat in silence, feeling the weight of betrayal crushing me. The next morning I woke up and knew I couldn't stay in this toxic environment. I had to make a choice, and it wouldn't be about saving what was lost. I was done. But how? How do you execute a clean break from someone you once trusted with your whole heart? Even in my pain, a small part of me felt a rush of exhilaration. Maybe this was my chance to break free from the chains of a love that had turned sour. It was time to plot my revenge, not just against Sarah, but against the idea that I was boring and predictable. I would surprise her, not with fireworks or flowers, but with a clean break she'd never see coming. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the brink of something new. I knew I had to plan this carefully. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming my life. I was ready to take action. After that explosive confrontation, I spent a few days in a haze. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, and it felt like my mind was running on a loop, replaying every moment leading up to that night. I was determined to keep my cool, but inside I was bubbling with a mix of betrayal and anger. Sarah went about her day as if nothing had happened, throwing in the occasional passive-aggressive comment about how I was overreacting. It made my blood boil. I needed a strategy. I had to make this count. I didn't want to confront her again until I was ready to end this charade once and for all. I started mapping out a plan to execute my revenge, not to hurt her in a petty way, but to show her that I was anything but boring and to take back the power she had stripped from me. I began by reaching out to some friends whom I hadn't seen in a while. It felt good to reconnect. I didn't tell them about Sarah or the affair. I just told them I needed a change and wanted to catch up. I spent the next few weekends hanging out with them, rediscovering parts of myself that Sarah had slowly pushed aside over the years. I went hiking, hit the bars, and even tried rock climbing. I realized there was a whole world outside of my predictable life, and I was ready to embrace it. One evening, while out with friends, I met this woman named Lisa. She was vibrant, full of life, and had an infectious laugh. I was drawn to her energy and found myself opening up about my life, though I kept the details of my marriage vague. Lisa was recently single and looking to enjoy life without any strings attached. It was exhilarating to talk to someone who didn't know my history, who didn't see me as the boring husband. We exchanged numbers, and I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Meanwhile, I continued to pay attention to Sarah. I was gathering evidence for when the time came to confront her again. I took mental notes of her behavior, the texts I saw on her phone, the late nights and the excuses. It was all building up to this moment where I could finally show her the real consequences of her actions. I even started tracking her phone location discreetly using an app I had installed. I felt like a detective in a low-budget thriller, but it was empowering to take back control. One day, I received a notification that Sarah was at a location I recognized, the special restaurant she had mentioned in her text to Mike. I was furious and felt a sense of betrayal wash over me again. This was my chance to confront her with the proof. I decided to show up unexpectedly. When I arrived, I saw her sitting at a table, laughing and leaning in closer to a guy I had never seen before. My hands clenched into fists as I stood there, watching the woman I loved flirt with someone else, playing house while I sat in the shadows. I considered walking in and making a scene, but then I thought better of it. I needed to stick to my plan. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing I was still hurting. Instead, I took a step back and left the restaurant, my mind racing. I didn't want to confront her there. That would give her the chance to twist it all around and make me look like the jealous husband. No, I needed to keep my cool and wait for the moment when I had all the cards in my hand. Once I got home, I felt an odd sense of calm wash over me. I had the power now. I would surprise her with the truth, with everything I had gathered. I felt like I was finally pulling the strings of my life, and it was exhilarating. The days passed, and I kept my distance from Sarah. I was cordial, but she seemed oblivious to my emotional distance. I decided that the confrontation would happen that Saturday, just a few days later. It would give me time to finalize all my evidence and prepare my emotional farewell. I also kept seeing Lisa during this time, and she became a breath of fresh air in my increasingly suffocating life. She made me laugh, challenged me, and reminded me that there was joy and spontaneity out there. I was starting to contemplate what my life would look like outside of this toxic relationship, and I liked what I envisioned. I planned to end things with Sarah once and for all, and the thought of it sent a thrill through me. No more being boring and predictable. I was ready to reclaim my life and show her just how wrong she was about me. I felt powerful and determined as the day approached. The moment was coming, and I needed to stay focused. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make sure she understood the weight of her choices. I felt a strange mix of sadness and excitement as I prepared for the showdown that would change everything. I was ready to end this chapter of my life and start anew, ready to embrace whatever came next. The day of reckoning arrived, and I felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. It was a Saturday, and the sun was shining, casting a golden hue across the streets of Portland. I spent the morning packing around my apartment, going over the evidence I had gathered. I had screenshots of texts, details of her whereabouts, and a clear picture of the lies she had spun over the last few months. I had told Sarah I was going to run some errands, but in reality, I was preparing for what I had dubbed the confrontation. I wanted to ensure I had everything lined up before I faced her again. I had even texted Lisa earlier, telling her that I needed to sort things out with Sarah and that I'd reach out afterward. I felt like I was playing a high-stakes game. As the afternoon rolled in, I could hear Sarah moving around the apartment. She was in the kitchen, making what smelled like one of her favorite dishes. I took a deep breath and walked into the living room where she was setting the table. She looked up and smiled, that same smile I had fallen in love with years ago, but I couldn't let it sway me. This wasn't the time for nostalgia. "Hey, Jake, you're back early. I thought you'd be out longer," she said, her tone light and cheerful. I nodded, forcing a smile, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yeah, just got everything I needed. Mind if we talk for a minute?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She raised an eyebrow, the smile faltering just a bit. "Sure, what's up?" she replied, her casual demeanor setting off alarm bells in my head. I motioned for her to sit down, and as she did, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. This was it. I was going to confront her about everything, her lies, her infidelity, and the betrayal that had turned my world upside down. "Sarah, I found something that I think we need to discuss." I started, trying to maintain a calm exterior despite the storm brewing inside me. "I've been noticing some things lately, and I can't keep quiet about it anymore." Her expression shifted from curiosity to defensiveness. "What things?" "Jake, you're starting to sound paranoid." I pulled out my phone and opened the text thread. This is what I found." I handed her the phone, watching her face as she read the messages from Mike. I could see the color drain from her face. "Jake, I can explain." She blurted out, looking genuinely panicked now. "It's not what it looks like. Mike is just a friend. We were talking about work." "Really?" I replied, my voice rising, anger bubbling to the surface. "Because it sounds like more than just work to me. You don't tell a friend that you miss them and can't wait to see them tonight." I leaned in closer, the gravity of the moment weighing heavily between us. "You've been lying to me, and I deserve better than this." Okay, I admit I've been distant, but it doesn't mean I'm cheating. I'm not that kind of person." She stammered, her eyes darting around as if searching for an escape route. "Yet here we are," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the disappointment flooding my heart. "You have betrayed me, Sarah. You called me boring and predictable, but you are the one who has been living a double life. I deserve honesty, not this pathetic excuse of a relationship." She stood up suddenly, packing the room. "You don't understand. You've been so wrapped up in your routine," I felt like I was going to explode. I needed something exciting. "Exciting?" I scoffed. "So your idea of excitement is to sleep with someone else? That's your solution?" "Don't twist my words. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, it just happened." She yelled back, her voice breaking. The truth was, it didn't matter how she tried to frame it. It was clear to me now that the woman I had married was gone, and in her place stood someone who didn't care about our vows, our life, or the love we had shared. I was done with these games, and I was ready to walk away. "I don't want to do this anymore, Sarah," I said, my voice steady now. "I think it's best if we separate. I need to find myself again, and you need to figure out what you really want." Her eyes widened in shock, and for a moment she looked as if I had slapped her. "You can't be serious. You're throwing everything away just like that." "Yes, I'm serious," I replied, feeling resolute. "I've spent too long feeling like I'm not enough for you. This isn't the life I deserve to be with someone who respects me and our relationship." She sank back onto the couch, the fight leaving her. "You're really going to leave me over this?" "It's not just this, it's everything. I can't trust you anymore," I said, every word cutting through the air like a knife. "You made your choice when you decided to betray me. I'm simply making mine now." The silence between us was suffocating. I could see the shock morphing into anger on her face, but I didn't care. This was long overdue. I stood up, feeling a surge of empowerment wash over me. "I'm going to pack my things and find a place to stay. We'll talk about the logistics later, but for now I need space." As I walked toward the bedroom, I heard her voice break. "You'll regret this, Jake, you'll see." But instead of feeling fear or remorse, I felt liberated. I was finally taking control of my life, breaking free from the chains of a toxic relationship that had dulled my spirit. I was ready to step into the unknown, to embrace whatever came next without her. As I Gathered my belongings, I felt a mix of relief and grief. Each item I packed reminded me of the life I had built with Sarah, the wedding photos, the souvenirs from our trips, mementos from birthdays and anniversaries. It was hard to reconcile that those warm memories had now become symbols of betrayal, but I knew deep down that this was necessary. I was doing this for myself, to reclaim my life and my happiness. I spent hours packing up my things, carefully placing everything in boxes. I found it oddly satisfying to see my life fit into neat little packages, a tangible representation of my decision to break free. I didn't want to look back, but I also couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the loving moments that now felt tainted. When I finished packing, I glanced around the empty apartment. It felt surreal to think that I would never share this space with Sarah again. I was walking away from the life we had built together, but it didn't feel like a loss. It felt more like a liberation. I was taking the first step toward discovering who I truly was outside of that relationship. After loading my car, I sent a quick message to Lisa, letting her know that I had moved out and was ready to embrace this new chapter. I didn't want to rush into anything with her, but I found myself excited about the possibilities. I could take things slow and enjoy the freedom of being single, something I hadn't experienced in years. I drove to a friend's place, an old college buddy named Mark. He had offered me a place to crash until I found my own spot. I needed someone to talk to, someone who could understand what I was going through. When I arrived, Mark greeted me with a welcoming hug and led me inside. "Man, it's good to see you. I didn't think it would be under these circumstances," he said, sensing the heaviness in my heart. "What happened?" I took a deep breath and recounted everything that had transpired over the past weeks, the late nights, the discovery of the texts, the confrontation. Mark listened intently, nodding as I shared my experience. When I finished, he looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and admiration. "You did right by yourself. Jake, you deserve someone who respects you," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Don't let her make you feel guilty for wanting more out of life." I spent the next few days settling in with Mark, and it felt refreshing to be surrounded by a friend who genuinely cared about me. We went out for beers, played video games, and even hit the gym together. For the first time in what felt like ages, I began to rediscover pieces of myself that I had lost along the way. As the week wore on, I found myself thinking less about Sarah and focusing more on my own happiness. I went back to my old hobbies, playing guitar, reading, and even trying my hand at cooking again. I was starting to feel alive again, and the weight that had pressed down on my chest for so long was finally lifting. Then one evening, while I was sitting on Mark's couch, Lisa texted me. "Hey, hope you're doing okay. Want to grab coffee soon?" My heart raced. I hadn't communicated much with her since I moved out, but the thought of seeing her again filled me with excitement. I quickly replied, and we set a time to meet. I spent the next few days looking forward to our coffee date, a chance to explore something new without the baggage of my past weighing me down. When I met Lisa at a local cafe, I felt a flutter in my stomach. She looked radiant, her bright smile lighting up the room. We chatted easily, and I felt like I could finally breathe again. She was funny, engaging, and completely unaffected by the chaos of my previous life. I told her a little about what I had been through without going into too much detail. I wanted to keep it light, at least for now. As we shared stories and laughter, I couldn't help but feel drawn to her. Her zest for life was contagious. I realized how much I had missed this kind of connection, someone who was genuinely interested in me, not just in how I fit into their narrative. But as I left the cafe, the shadow of my past still lingered in the back of my mind. I knew I had to be careful. The wounds from my marriage were still fresh, and I didn't want to rush into something new without fully healing first. That night, as I lay in bed at Mark's place, I thought about Sarah and how far I had come in just a short period. I had taken back my life, and I was determined not to let anyone dictate my happiness again. I realized that I had learned something valuable through this experience. It's okay to choose yourself first, to seek fulfillment outside of a relationship that no longer served you. The next morning, I woke up feeling refreshed and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. I was no longer defined by my past. I was Jake, A man who had the strength to walk away from a toxic relationship and embrace a future filled with potential. I was excited to see where this journey would take me, and I felt ready to tackle it head-on. The next phase of my life awaited, and I was determined to make it my own. I was ready to keep moving forward, one step at a time, into this new world of possibilities. I had no idea what would come next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. The next few weeks flew by like a whirlwind. I immersed myself in this new life, enjoying the freedom that came with being single. I kept hanging out with Mark, hitting up local bars and exploring new hobbies. I was finally living the way I had always wanted to, but never thought I could. The weight of Sarah's betrayal had transformed into fuel for my newfound independence. I continued to see Lisa, and our chemistry was undeniable. We explored the city together, went to concerts, and even tried out new restaurants. Each time I was with her, I felt more at ease. She brought laughter and spontaneity into my life, and with her, I didn't feel the pressure to be someone I was. The best part was that I could be completely honest with her about my recent breakup. There was no need for pretense or hiding behind a mask. One evening, as we strolled through a local park, Lisa turned to me with a serious expression. "Jake, I want you to know that I really like spending time with you, but I also understand that you're going through a lot right now. I don't want to rush anything if you're not ready." Her sincerity struck a chord within me. I admired her for being upfront and respectful of my situation. I appreciated her patience, but I also realized that I was ready for something more. I had spent too long letting life happen to me instead of actively participating in it. "I appreciate that, Lisa. I really do. You've brought back joy into my life when I didn't think it was possible," I confessed, taking a deep breath. "I think I'm ready to see where this goes if you're open to it." Her face lit up with a smile, filling my heart with warmth. "I'd love that, Jake. Let's just take it one day at a time, okay?" We continued our casual romance, taking the time to enjoy each other's company without the pressure of labels or expectations. It was refreshing, and I found myself slowly healing from the emotional scars of my past. I began to realize that moving on didn't mean forgetting. It meant embracing the lessons learned and allowing myself to grow. However, as I was finding my footing in this new chapter, Sarah seemed to have other plans. One Saturday morning I received a text from her and my heart sank. It had been weeks since we had spoken, and I had hoped she would respect my decision to move on. "Can we talk? I need to explain everything. I really want to clear the air," the message read. I hesitated, my finger hovering over my phone screen. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to keep the door shut on that chapter of my life. But I also felt a strange sense of curiosity. What could she possibly say? Did she even understand the gravity of what she had done? After some back and forth in my mind, I decided to respond. "I'm open to talking, but it needs to be in person." I didn't want to dive into this without having a clear boundary in place. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop, a neutral territory where I felt somewhat safe. As I arrived, I felt a knot of anxiety clenching my stomach. I hadn't seen her in weeks, and the uncertainty of how this conversation would unfold loomed over me like a dark cloud. When I walked into the cafe, Sarah was already seated at a small table, stirring her coffee with a distant look on her face. I noticed how different she appeared. Her hair was messy, her eyes looked tired, and she seemed smaller somehow, as if the weight of her choices had physically drained her. "Hey," I said, trying to maintain a neutral tone. "Hey," she replied quietly, avoiding my gaze. We exchanged awkward pleasantries before I finally broke the silence. "So, what did you want to talk about?" She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the table. "I've had a lot of time to think about everything that happened, and I realize now how selfish I was. I hurt you, Jake. I was too caught up in my own needs and desires to see how my actions affected you." I held her gaze, searching for sincerity in her words. Part of me wanted to feel anger, to unleash all the hurt she had caused me, but another part wanted to hear her out. "I know that's not enough to make things right, but I want you to know that I regret everything," she continued. "I never meant to hurt you, and I wish I could take it all back. I've been seeing a therapist trying to understand why I did what I did. I want to change. Her vulnerability caught me off guard. I had expected her to come in with more excuses or complaints, but here she was taking accountability. Still, I had to remind myself of the pain she had caused. I appreciate that you're owning up to your mistakes, Sarah, but it doesn't change what you did. You made a choice, and I can't pretend like it didn't happen. I watched as her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I felt a twinge of sympathy. But I quickly pushed it away. I had to stay strong. I know, and I'm so sorry. I just wanted a chance to tell you that I've changed, and I hope you can find it in your heart to forgive me one day, she said, her voice cracking. Forgiveness was a heavy word. I had been working on forgiving myself for the pain I endured, but forgiving her was a different battle altogether. I don't know if I can do that right now, I replied honestly. I'm still trying to move on from everything. I need to focus on my own healing. She nodded, understanding dawning on her face. I get it, I truly do. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry and I'll always care about you, Jake. After a few moments of uncomfortable silence, I finally spoke again. I think it's best if we part ways for good. I need to close this chapter for myself. Sarah sighed, looking defeated. I understand. I wish you nothing but happiness. As I stood up to leave, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. It was freeing to finally articulate my feelings and put an end to the lingering ties between us. I walked out of that cafe with my head held high, knowing I had made the right choice. I had faced Sarah and her confession, but more importantly, I had faced my own feelings. I was ready to embrace my new life, to focus on the things that brought me joy. I was no longer tied to the past. I was finally free. Now it was time to fully invest in my future, one step at a time. I was ready to continue discovering who I was and who I wanted to be, without the shadows of betrayal clouding my vision. I decided to give myself permission to pursue happiness, and that was the most liberating feeling of all. Leaving the cafe felt like shedding a weight I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. I walked back to my car with a newfound sense of clarity. The conversation with Sarah had been difficult, but it had also provided the closure I didn't know I needed. I could finally move on without looking back. In the weeks that followed, I threw myself into my new routine. I dove into work with renewed energy and passion. I started a new project at the office that challenged me creatively, and I found myself thriving in the chaos of deadlines. My colleagues even noticed the change in my demeanor. I was more engaged, more open, and it felt good to contribute positively to our team. But it wasn't just work that filled my days. I continued to explore the city with Lisa, and things between us deepened. We spent lazy weekends at food festivals, went hiking in nearby parks, and even attended a few local concerts together. With her, I discovered a sense of adventure that I had forgotten existed. I learned to laugh again, to embrace spontaneity, and to cherish the simple moments. Each time I was with her, I felt more like myself, and less like the shadow of the man I had been in my marriage. One evening, while we were sitting on a rooftop bar overlooking the city, Lisa turned to me, her eyes sparkling in the soft glow of the string lights above us. You know, I really appreciate how open you've been about everything you've gone through. It means a lot to me, she said, her voice sincere. I smiled, feeling grateful for her understanding. I think it's important to share those parts of ourselves, the good and the bad. I've gone through a lot, but it's made me who I am today. I'm learning to embrace every part of my journey. She reached across the table and took my hand. I'm glad you're finding your way. You deserve happiness, Jake. I want to be part of that journey if you'll let me. Her words resonated deeply, and for the first time in a while I felt a sense of hope for the future. I leaned in and kissed her softly, realizing that this was a new beginning, one that I had the power to shape. As summer transitioned into fall, I continued to grow and explore. I found an apartment of my own, a cozy little place that felt like a blank canvas ready for my personal touch. I decorated it with things that reflected my personality: music posters, bookshelves filled with my favorite reads, and plants that brought life into the space. The more I invested in my new life, the more I understood the importance of self-discovery. I started taking cooking classes, experimenting with different cuisines, and even organized a few get-togethers with new friends I had made. I realized that I wasn't just moving on from my past, I was actively building a future. Then, one afternoon, I received a call from Mark. He suggested we go on a camping trip with some friends. I hesitated at first, thinking about how I was still finding my footing, but then I felt a spark of excitement. It was a chance to engage with nature, to disconnect from the chaos of life and embrace new experiences. The trip turned out to be one of the best weekends of my life. Surrounded by friends, laughter, and the beauty of the great outdoors, I felt more alive than ever. We hiked through trails, shared stories by the campfire, and even attempted cooking over an open flame, a hilarious disaster that became a cherished memory. It felt liberating to be surrounded by people who had no idea about my past. I could just be Jake, the guy who loved adventure and tried his best to enjoy life. On the last night of our trip, as we sat around the fire, I reflected on how far I had come. I had no idea what my life would look like after my marriage ended, I said to the group, the flames flickering in the dark. But I can honestly say it's been a blessing. I'm learning to embrace myself and find joy again. Mark raised his beer in a toast to Jake for finding his way back to happiness. The group cheered, and I felt a warmth spread through me that had been absent for far too long. As the fire crackled and the stars twinkled overhead, I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. I realized that life is unpredictable, filled with ups and downs, but in every challenge lies an opportunity for growth. I was no longer defined by my past. I was creating my own narrative, one filled with resilience, hope, and possibility. I had learned that it's okay to choose yourself, to pursue happiness, and to seek love in unexpected places. I was ready to embrace whatever came next, open to new experiences and connections. The journey of healing was ongoing, but I felt confident that I was on the right path. As I drifted off to sleep that night, surrounded by friends and the serenity of nature, I smiled, knowing that my future was bright. I was ready for it all, the adventures, the challenges, and even the love that was waiting just around the corner. I was Jake, and this was my life, my story, and I was finally living it to the fullest.